So, something strange happened to me. Actually, not just to me, to lots of people, or a handful of people a few days ago. It was nighttime, probably between 9 and 10 o'clock at night, and I was walking my dog, Twiggy, as I do. It was her night walk. We were doing our lap. And I was practicing my French and Italian. I'm trying to learn both on Duolingo, which I have mixed feelings about, but it's convenient, it's on my phone, and I just am in the habit of practicing languages with it while I walk my dog. So if you can picture this, it's me and Twiggy walking, and I'm stumbling through trying to speak French or Italian into my phone. And I think that Duolingo, if I'm going to give like a customer review, it's good, it's fine, it's infantilizing. This is what I don't like about it. I like that it's convenient. I like that I can practice with it. I mean, it does its job, but if you've never used it, it's kind of gamified and cartoonish and kind of childlike and infantilizing. So you do a lesson and then you'll get like jewels. You know what I'm saying? It's like a video game. I don't want that. They're always asking you if you want to like do something and join something, and you're competing against other people. Like there's rankings. I'm like, I'm not 7 years old. And then they're constantly trying to upsell you too. It's like, oh, do you want to open up a family plan? Do you want to get this new icon on your home screen? And it's just like, I'm already subscribed. I'm already paying you. And you just will not quit. Just hounding me, treating me like a child. I'm about to walk out. Find myself another language app. So if you're out there and you work for Duolingo, you need to knock this off. It's embarrassing. It's a good app. It's a nice way to learn languages, but most of the people learning languages on your app are probably adults. Treat them like adults. And if we're already paying customers, stop with the upselling. Nobody likes it. Can't stand upselling. You're already a customer, but we want to squeeze more out of you. So we're going to hump your leg on a daily basis or a nightly basis, badgering you with prompts and offers. Fuck off. So anyway, I'm walking my dog and I'm practicing Italian or whatever it is. And I'm kind of locked in. I have my earbuds in. I don't usually pay much attention to what's going on, if I'm being honest. I'm just practicing. I have my head down. And I'm walking up the street, and it's a kind of a commercial district in Los Angeles where there are shops and restaurants and whatnot. And all of a sudden, I realize that I have happened upon a scene where people are gathered and there is a woman on the ground in medical distress. So if you can picture this, like I'm, head down, I'm practicing, I'm reading on my phone, I'm speaking Italian or trying to speak Italian, and then suddenly I sort of look up and there's about 30 people gathered around, and there's a woman on her back on the sidewalk. She's she looks like she's about 30, 35 years old, and someone is doing CPR on her. And I'm like dumbfounded. I sort of freeze, like what are you going to do? Like I was in shock. And I stand there, and the guy who is doing CPR seems to be her friend. And then there's another guy nearby who is holding his phone, and his phone is on speaker, and it's a 911. So he has somebody on 911 who is advising everybody, and you can kind of hear it. But the guy with the phone is kind of translating whatever is being said by the 911 operator. And apparently they were advising CPR. And I was unsure what was going on. I don't think anybody knew. And I wondered if this woman was in cardiac arrest or if she was having a seizure. And I think the reason, aside from just some degree of common sense, is that my son is epileptic. So I know a thing or two about seizures, and they can be scary, and they can seem like maybe some sort of cardiac event. Or if you didn't know what you were looking at, I can see how you might start CPR, perhaps unnecessarily. And so I was just like, I was like, is she having a cardiac event or is she having a seizure? Like, if she's having a seizure, you should roll her onto her side. And I kind of said as much, and then somebody started to the guy tried to sort of roll her onto her side, and you could sort of hear her gasping. It was very upsetting, this poor woman. And as all of this was happening, suddenly a guy sprints up to us, and he's wearing spandex. And he's like, I'm a nurse. What's going on here? And he just sort of takes over. And he's like, she has a pulse, and he starts going like very aggressively to doing CPR. And, the guy holding the phone was like, we've got a nurse here. And somebody else, I think, was like, she just had surgery. I think maybe the friend was like, she had surgery 2 days ago. It was pure chaos. And I'm standing there watching this guy do chest compressions. I've never seen this before in my life. I've never seen somebody in this degree of like real-time medical distress. And I guess she had been out with her friend. They were walking their dogs, and she just collapsed on the sidewalk in front of an ice cream shop. So her friend is holding, I think, his dog and her dog on a leash at the same time. And this nurse is doing chest compressions on her. And 911 is on speakerphone. We're waiting for the ambulance. Of course, it feels like it's taking way too long. And there was something kind of stupefying about it all, if I'm being honest. It was unnerving, but everyone was pretty calm. I think we were all sort of stunned and in a kind of grim awe, witnessing what we were witnessing, if that's even a way to put it. And so I'm watching this, and the nurse looks up. He's getting kind of winded. He's working hard. And he looks up suddenly, and he said, can anybody run to Rite Aid? There's like a Rite Aid drugstore down the street. He's like, can anybody go to Rite Aid and see if they have a defibrillator? And there was like about 1 or 2 seconds, 1 or 2 long seconds where everybody watching was sort of processing this. And then I just suddenly started sprinting. Like I ran out into the street, and I was sprinting up the middle of the street. So not on the sidewalk, but up the middle of the street, because Rite Aid is across the street. It's on the other side of the street. And I'm running at a dead sprint, which, I'm 48 years old. I don't sprint very often, but I was sprinting with my dog. And I don't run in the middle of the street ever, but I was kind of like running up the divide, up the line. And it turns out somebody on a bike had beat me there and had found out that there is in fact no defibrillator on the premises at Rite Aid, which kind of makes no sense. I feel like drugstores, if you have a pharmacy happening, there should be a defibrillator handy. So I'm out of breath, and I'm like realizing that I'm a little bit, I'm out of breath because I've been sprinting, but I'm also like adrenalized in a weird way. And I recognize this feeling in my body from a time when my daughter, at like the age of 2, had a febrile seizure, which is to say a seizure born of a sudden spike in fever, which can happen to little kids. And I I think I talked about this actually on the show after it happened, but I got a call from my daughter's nanny who had taken her up to the library, and she said to me in kind of like broken English, she said like, she's not breathing. That's what I heard on the phone. And so the library was within running distance of our apartment, and I took off that day and was running and was all of a sudden like unable to breathe. I realized I was like in a panic, and I couldn't breathe. I barely got halfway to the library, and I had to. I didn't stop, but I was realizing that I could not catch my breath, and it was kind of the same. Not nearly as intense, but it was kind of the same. I was like, wow, I'm really winded here. What is going on? And I'm standing in front of Rite Aid, and I talk to this guy on his bike. And it turns out, in Los Angeles from time to time, there will be these evenings where huge groups of cyclists will ride around the city on their bikes. And this was happening on this night as all of this medical chaos was sort of unfolding. So there were all these people hanging around with their bikes, and they were like getting ice cream cones essentially, and talking to one another. And I could smell pot. I think a lot of people were stoned. And the nurse who was attending to this woman who sort of sprinted up wearing spandex was part of this big group of cyclists. He's wearing his cycling gear. So anyway, I'm at Rite Aid. There's no defibrillator. Guy on his bike had beat me there. And as I'm standing there, the ambulance with its siren wailing comes rolling past me. And so I jog back down to the scene, and everyone is still standing there. And we're just sort of watching the paramedics go to work and do their thing. And nobody really quite knows how this woman is doing, but doesn't look good. So there's people kind of talking quietly. I remember turning to some young ladies standing next to me, and we were sort of going back and forth about how crazy this was and how awful. And then I remember that a young, like teenage boy pulled up next to me on his bike. I don't think he was part of the night cyclist contingency, but he was maybe just a kid from the neighborhood or something. And he pulls up next to me, and he's kind of, standing astride his bicycle for a second. And then he looks at me and he said, "Is everything okay?" And I'm like, are you seeing this? Like, they're giving this woman CPR. They have like an oxygen mask on her face now. And she had visibly wet herself, which, I don't mean to be crude. I'm just saying, like, this was a medical catastrophe. And very upsetting. And so, this kid's like, "Is everything okay?" And I like kind of looked at him. I was like, no. As it turns out, it's not. If you can like evaluate what's in front of you, it's pretty obvious that everything is not okay. But I mean, he is to be forgiven. We say these sorts of things in these kinds of situations, right? We say stupid shit. I've done that before. So they load this woman onto the ambulance, and I was kind of looking into the ambulance as they were loading her in to see what the degree of emergency attention was. Like, were they really doing CPR? Were they defibrillating? And it seemed like they were sort of not doing a ton. They weren't in like a gigantic hurry, and so it made me wonder if she had already passed away, or if they had a pulse and she was breathing on her own and they had stabilized her. The truth is, I don't know. So the ambulance, turns its siren on, and it takes off for the hospital. And the group of us who had been standing there witnessing all of this, we sort of hung around for I hung around for like another minute or two, and then it was like, all right, I guess I just walk home now. It was sort of confusing. Like, what are you supposed to do after you see something like that? I guess I just go home. I think I might have just seen somebody die. Or not. I'm not 100% sure. I have no way of verifying. But it certainly didn't look good. So I say goodbye to these young ladies that I had been chatting with. It was a kind of a somber goodbye, like, nice to meet you. Sorry we just, watched someone have a medical catastrophe. And I start walking. Maybe it was more than a minute. I don't know how many minutes it was, 2-3 minutes after the ambulance had left. And I'm walking with my dog back up the street in the direction of home. And as I pass in front of another ice cream shop, because there are ice cream shops everywhere for some reason, I see the nurse, the guy in spandex who had sprinted up and taken over and had given this woman like aggressive CPR for, like 5 to 7 minutes, maybe a little bit longer, just nonstop chest compressions. And as I'm walking past this ice cream shop, I see him, and he's eating ice cream out of a cup, like he's spooning ice cream into his mouth, and he's talking to his friends, and he's laughing. He's just having like a laugh, as if as if nothing had happened. And it's like if my eyes were like a movie camera, I'm like going in slow motion past this guy, watching him. And he's just eating ice cream and talking to his friends. No big deal. Just did CPR on a woman. Now I'm enjoying like some mint chocolate chip on a Thursday evening or whatever it was. And I was just like, whoa, like that. Like part of me was like, is this the same guy? How can he just be eating ice cream? How can you eat anything after that? But then I thought to myself, well, he's a nurse. He might work in a trauma bay or, some sort of, hospital ward where he sees this kind of thing all the time. It's just like another day at the office, another person to do CPR on, possibly another person dying. Oh, well. Going to go have some ice cream. Did my best. And as I continued to walk, what else was striking to me, or another thing that was striking to me, was the fact that there were all of these people like standing around, like kind of coming out of restaurants or waiting in line for ice cream or whatever it was. It was a busy night. There were a lot of people out. And this was maybe a half a block away from where this woman had collapsed. And as I'm walking through all these people, I noticed that like none of them were affected by it. None of them knew it had even happened. Half a block away. And they were just, in their little groups, their little dinner groups, like coming out of the restaurant, getting ready to go home, laughing, hugging goodbye. And meanwhile, a half a block away, just minutes before, a young woman in her 30s, a young person, just had like a cardiac event right there on the sidewalk. Like a human catastrophe, possibly a human death. Nobody even knew. Nobody will ever know, probably. And what's so strange about it, too, is that this is a big city. People die in Los Angeles by the dozens every day, right? And it's not the kind of thing that I think is going to even get reported. Maybe it will. I don't know. But I can imagine that I haven't seen it in the papers. I haven't heard anybody talk about it. And speaking of talking about it, when I was walking home, feeling a little bit numb and stoned almost, it was about 10 o'clock at night, and I'm like, should I call someone and tell them what I just saw? I was like, I guess I could call my friend, but that would be, it's 10 o'clock. What am I going to say? I almost didn't feel like talking about it. And then I thought, well, I could text my wife and let her know. But I know that she was like probably like asleep with our son, like snuggling him, like putting him to bed. And if I texted her, like, what do you say? Oh, hey, just saw somebody collapse and get CPR for 10 minutes. I had to sprint up the street to get a defibrillator that didn't exist at Rite Aid. And so then it was like, well, I guess I'll just walk home and maybe tell her after I wake her up, from putting our son to bed. She always conks out next to him. And I'm like, you know what? I'm not doing that. It just occurred to me there was just no good way to talk about it. It's such an awful situation. And I didn't know this woman. I have no idea who she was and really no way of figuring it out. I could have asked on site, I could have asked her friend, but he didn't really seem approachable. He was in really bad shock and he's holding these 2 dogs on leashes. I'm not going to go up to him and be like, hey, by the way, can I get your name? I mean, I suppose there's a way to do it, but it wasn't appropriate in the moment. Nobody was talking to anybody really, except for like people on the periphery sort of like murmuring to one another. It was a disaster. So I didn't tell my wife what happened. I still haven't told her because I feel like it would have just upset her. I didn't see what the reason would be, like what's the outcome of me telling her other than her just feeling awful and sad and a little bit scared, right? It's like this empathetic fear of death that, I'm sure would have unfolded for her. And I just didn't feel like doing that to her because there's nothing that she could have said or done. And there's just like this kind of cul-de-sac that I found myself in where I just had to hold the information all by myself. I did tell the next morning. I went on a hike with my friend Matt Summel, who's a writer that some of you may know. He and I went for a walk first thing the next morning, and I was like, oh, by the way, I think I might have seen somebody die last night. So, I told him. But other than that, there's nobody else that I've told, except for now all of you. And yeah, that's the latest. I really hope this woman is okay. I don't know how I'm ever going to be able to verify, but I'm certainly going to try. I'm going to stop into the ice cream shop and see if they've heard anything. And I really pray that she made it. If she did not make it, my heart goes out to her and to everybody who knows her. What can you say? Life is fragile. It's a very delicate situation that we are all in. It can be easy to lose sight of that. So maybe to try to end things on less of a morbid note, let this story and this monologue and this experience of mine be a friendly reminder to appreciate the moment, to live with courage and kindness, and to not live in fear, right? Go for it. It could all be over before you know it.